So our client, Marcia, is an immigrant from Brazil. She was a licensed attorney in Brazil. She was rear-ended at the 980-580 connection over in Oakland, driving a Mazda Protege. Rear-ended at a very high rate of speed.
When we got the case, I looked at it and I said, well, wait a second, the car manufacturer is building a car to drive on the freeway. And what happens on freeways, particularly in places like LA and the Bay Area, cars stop. And some cars fail to see, the car's stopped, and they get into accidents at high speed. So it seems like you ought to be able to build a seat that can withstand it, or at least sufficiently protect somebody from serious injury or death.
So the force of the impact was very severe. And what happened was she had slowed for two collisions that had taken place in front of her and was stopped. Person behind her, driving a truck, didn't see that she had stopped and hit her at basically full speed.
You want a seat back that's going to withstand an accident and hold the driver in between the seat back and the steering wheel. That's the basic idea when you're designing a car. The challenge is when the change in velocity gets too high, it's very difficult to actually make that seat back withstand those high velocity impacts.
What happened was her seat back moved backward during the crash. As the truck continued on into the passenger compartment, it folded her forward like a clamshell.
So that was the biggest, I think the biggest challenge in the case was trying to show that Mazda knew that this kind of accident would happen, never did anything to try to build a better seat, and that the poor guy who hit our client, Mr. Alfresco, while certainly to blame, he had seconds to react to the stopped cars with the sunshine in his eyes. Mazda had decades to figure out a way to build a better seat.
So she suffered 13 rib fractures, a burst fracture of her L5, a traumatic brain injury. There was a 20 to 30 centimeter laceration at the back of her skull that went all the way down to her skull. The damage to her nerves caused what's called cauda equina syndrome. And she basically had no sensation below the waist.
The challenge with it is it's a condition that is intractable. You can't cure it.
So she's hospitalized for about 2 months between the initial hospitalization and then the time in the rehab facility. She eventually is released from the hospital, but then has to come back again and again and again because of the inability to be able to deal with this nerve pain, etc.
If you look at this car, our biggest concern was the jurors were going to look at this car and they were going to say the same thing that my mother said. She's lucky to be alive. It's so massively crushed. That's if you look at the whole car. But if you look at the occupant safety zone, that's the space from the steering wheel to the seat back, that space actually did what it was supposed to do and it stayed intact. It was a safe zone for the operator of the vehicle, for Marcia. The pretrial offer in this case was $12,500 for Mazda for both our injured plaintiff driver as well as her husband. We demanded, prior to trial, $3.5 million. That was the lowest. The final verdict was almost $12 million just against Mazda. The total verdict was $14.9 million. Mazda thought all along that the jury would buy into this theory that you could never design a seat to withstand these kind of speeds. They also thought that ultimately the design of a car was complicated enough that the jurors would see things their way. The most gratifying part of this case is that this case might actually change passenger safety. Mazda Motor Corporation is not the only one interested in this case. The entire automobile manufacturing industry is.